The world's most notorious drug lord emerged from the sewers out into the street. He found himself across from a Walmart, disoriented after his long underground journey. El Chapo must be creative. There wasn't any cavalry. According to the witnesses, he and his top lieutenant stole a white Volkswagen from a driver, but it caught fire a few blocks later. Two males saw a red Ford Focus being driven by a woman and her 5-year-old grandson. Witnesses said that the lieutenant exclaimed, "Get out of the car now," as he opened the door, and she left her belongings in the car and took the child out of the back seat. The lieutenant returned her purse and walked away. The Mexican Marines had been looking for Guzmán for 6 months, ever since he embarrassed the country by escaping through a tunnel in his bathroom floor. The pursuit led them to the Golden Triangle, on the border between Durango and Sinaloa, where the Mr. Guzmán is revered. He evaded multiple Mexican raids, including one while interviewing Sean Penn. It was pricey. Officials searched 18 of his residences and properties. Mr. Guzmán craved comfort. After spending days in the harsh mountains, he landed in Los Mochis, Sinaloa, early in January, at a home where officials had followed a tunnel digger's escape. Building a house took several weeks. Intercepted calls suggested a significant arrival. According to Mexican officials, the final piece of proof was a lunch order. A man in a white SUV picked up a large order of tacos 2 streets away around midnight at January 8th, according to witnesses. Marines stormed the property at about 4:30 a.m., encountering shooters in a maze of doors. This house, like all of Mr. Guzmán's, had ingenious escape hatches, one under the refrigerator and another behind a closet mirror. Hours later, on the way out of town, officials apprehended Guzmán for the 3rd time since 1993. A strong symbol. Mr. Guzmán's capture, described using information from interviews with witnesses and government officials, police reports, military video, and Mexican news reports claimed by officials, brings to a close, for the time being, one of the most exhaustive manhunts conducted by the Mexican government, an effort that drew in more than 2,500 people from across the country. The fact that all of that effort was devoted to the pursuit of a single individual whose arrest, despite his wealth and influence, will have little impact on the mechanics of the drug trade or the war against it, demonstrates how powerful a symbol Mr. Guzmán has become in Mexico and beyond. Mr. Guzmán, as the head of the Sinaloa cartel, embodies an identity that the country has sought to lose for decades. Some see the ignorant country lad turned cartel magnate as a modern-day Robin Hood, respecting him for his fight against the government and the kindness that he has to the needy. Others see him as a ruthless criminal who floods America's streets with drugs while leaving Mexico's streets littered with bodies. In any case, Mr. Guzmán represents a major issue for Mexico's government, who are attempting to define the country's image. His spectacular escape from prison last July, in full view of the video camera in his cell, shone a harsh light on the inefficiency and the corruption that has long plagued the Mexican state, leading many to compare the government to criminals. The capture of Mr. Guzmán, who has twice escaped from prison, is now and about Mexico restoring its security relationship with America, its global image, and perhaps most importantly, its leaders' relationship with their own people. El Chapo's image, on the other hand, seems to blossom only after he escapes. Mr. Guzmán has developed a reputation as the world's preeminent escape artist, perhaps more than the infamy he gained as a cartel boss, responsible for sending tons of cocaine to more than 50 countries around the world, with a greater reach than even Pablo Escobar in his heyday. Mr. Guzmán evaded Mexican and American authorities for more than a decade. After breaking out of prison in 2001, others say he escaped in a laundry cart, his team of engineers and diggers had skillfully excavated tunnels as a network of residences he owned, allowing him to sneak away time and time again, often just minutes before raids. When investigators arrived at a residence in Culiacán in February 2014, they discovered a typical Chapo technique, a tunnel entrance beneath a bathtub, via which the kingpin had just left. After all, he was the inventor of the border tunnel. Underground corridors outfitted with lights, ventilation, and mechanized carts used to bring drugs into the United States without having to deal with the stress of dodging customs inspectors. Mr. Guzmán's gang is thought to have dug more than 90 such tunnels between Mexico and the United States. But such tunnels pale in comparison to the one he built last summer to escape from the most secured wing of the country's most secure prison. During his 17-month confinement, Mr. Guzmán met frequently with acquaintances, not just to organize his legal defense, but also to plot his escape, according to Mexican officials. His soldiers purchased land near the prison and built an outer wall and had an incomplete building on it. The digging began a mile away from there. They eventually got to Mr. Guzmán's cell by digging up through the shower floor and into a narrow passage behind a waist-high wall that provided convicts with some seclusion from the 24-hour surveillance camera. Mr. Guzmán got into a shower, bowed over, and vanished into folklore for the second time on July 11th of 2015. 2 Cessna aircraft later, he was transported back to his childhood mountains, where the pursuit would begin all over again. Before fleeing, Guzmán devised a vanity project that assisted police in locating him. Guzmán was said to be conceited. His lawyers obtained the right to use his name in a biopic that he was producing. He attempted to persuade several Mexican actresses, most notably Yolanda Andrade, and his attention was drawn to Kate del Castillo's portrayal of a drug lord in La Reina del Sur. Mr. Guzmán directed a close associate to approach her after she demonstrated social media support for him. Before Guzmán's escape, del Castillo met with the lawyer in Mexico City to negotiate a film. Meetings and a contract continued while in the Sierra Madre. Mexican authorities tapped Mr. Guzmán and his associates' phones, listening in to their strange and touching discussions with the actress. Mr. Guzmán vowed to protect Mrs. del Castillo with his own eyes. When Miss del Castillo recommended questioning Mr. Penn, the drug lord didn't bat an eye. Perhaps he didn't know who Mr. Penn was. Authorities used the communications to track and locate Guzmán and prepare an arrest for October. The expedition was postponed because Mr. Penn and Miss del Castillo were nearby. The parties met on October 2nd in Sinaloa's Golden Triangle, near Cosala. Guzmán had gone to his ranch in Durango. The authorities had already begun to close in on Mr. Guzmán, barging into his allies' villages and houses, disrupting life for many in the areas where he was believed to be hiding. However, his meeting with the actors provided him with the break that they needed. Actionable intelligence about his precise location. 6 days later, a Marine detachment stormed Mr. Guzmán's ranch, acting on intelligence from American officials. Mr. Guzmán, who usually brought his 2 chefs with him wherever he went, dashed into a gully as he ran, bruising his face and his leg. A Black Hawk chopper orbiting the scene noticed him as he dashed away with his 2 female cooks and one of their toddlers in his arms. A Mexican Marine Special Forces sniper trained his rifle on the fugitive drug boss, but was ordered to step back. When he saw the Black Hawk, Mr. Guzmán leaned back with the infant in his arms, according to Mexican officials, hiding himself as a target. They said that the risk of harming one of the women or the child while firing on Mr. Guzmán was too great. In the weeks that followed, operations in and around Mr. Guzmán's control continued. The approaching winter's harsh weather also worried the cartel chief. Culiacán, Sinaloa's capital, where life might be more comfortable, was under continual watch. He needed to go somewhere outside of his usual sphere of influence. Los Mochis were ideal. In 2013, the city's power structure began to alter. The Beltran-Leyva cartel, which had long been the dominant power, was pushed out, handing dominance to Mr. Guzmán's Sinaloa cartel. The authorities followed one of Mr. Guzmán's accomplices to a residence in Los Mochis, on a major route with a movie theater, restaurants, and shopping nearby, after learning that he was planning a vacation to an urban area. Construction went underway very quickly. Neighbors came by on occasion to take a look. One of them was even guaranteed any additional concrete left over once the renovation was finished. "You're welcome to everything we don't use," he said to his next-door neighbor. "We're just doing some maintenance." Residents began breaking from their previous month's habits in January, according to authorities. They listened in on phone calls involving the grandma and his aunt. A car came at daybreak on January 7th. The certainty that Guzmán had come grew. They were almost confident after ordering tacos. The following morning, the 17 Mexican Navy Special Forces Marines raided the house, aided by 50 staff assigned to surveillance and drain system monitoring. They entered a small lobby surrounded by doors after cracking the metal door. Then there was gunfire. A Marine said, "We've got one injured," according to the soldier's helmet camera footage. The gunshots continued in the hallways. The commander directed a Marine to launch a grenade at one of the doors blocking their path. 2 Marines moved down another corridor, cautiously approaching the staircase used by the gunmen to flee to the roof, diverting fire away from the house. At 6:30 a.m., the house was secure. 5 of Guzmán's men were killed, and 4 were apprehended. Guzmán's chef were 2 of the women arrested inside. 1 Marine was injured. A search for the residence revealed 2 tunnels, one of which was hidden beneath the refrigerator to confound advancing troops, and both were hidden away in closets. A switch near the light bulb enabled Guzmán to escape through a trapdoor behind the mirror. Mr. Guzmán and his companion drove out of town on Highway 15. Federal agents were on the lookout, and they apprehended 2 people in a Ford Focus. 2 of Mexico's most terrifying men make cops nervous. Fearing a rescue by cartel forces, they shot the 2 while waiting for Marines. Mexican police officers claimed that they are aware that 40 assassins were on their way to free their boss. They chose the Hotel Do, which charges an hourly rate on the highway. They reserved rooms and they took pictures of Guzmán in a filthy vest. The drug lord begged for his release. He promised commercial opportunities. Threatening them had no effect. He allegedly told them, "You'll all die," according to the police. Guzmán was flown to Mexico City after the Marines arrived. According to a motel employee, everyone left with unpaid bills. Guzmán was flown by helicopter to the same prison from which he escaped 6 months earlier after being paraded in front of TV cameras at Mexico City's airport that night. Authorities indicated that his cells will be rotated so that he could never burrow out again. More cops and surveillance cameras would increase attentiveness. Many people feel like the longer the drug lord stays in Mexico, the more likely he is to depart. His lawyers have sought a number of novel injunctions to prevent his extradition to the United States, where he faces drug trafficking and murder charges. One, filed in August when Guzmán was still free, said that he couldn't get a fair trial in the United States owing to anti-Mexican sentiment. They cited Trump's words as evidence.